Seems like everybody has a podcast now, but can everyone make money from it? Companies like Megaphone helps publishers and advertisers monetize and measure their content. Joining us now to discuss the business of podcasts is Brendan Monaghan, Megaphone CEO. Brendan, thanks for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So who is making money off podcasts? It's a crowded field out there.
It is, but really publishers these days are really finding the audience receptivity towards podcasting, the content they're creating, and advertisers are really excited about it. So we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm, both from traditional direct response advertisers and now seeing a lot of interest from brand advertisers.
So I think a lot of people, when they talk about podcasts, the first thing they say is something to the effect of, oh, it's a really crowded space. And there are a lot of podcasts out there, but I would suspect that you might say it's less crowded than you would think. I mean, what are the opportunities you see right now in podcasts? Because we all know some of the big names, some of the big publishers, right? Mm-hmm. Mark Maron's not going anywhere. He's been doing his thing for 10 years probably, but there's a lot of places that are kind of underserved right now. What do you see as the opportunities in podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing, as we know about podcasting, is the niche audiences that it serves. So if you're interested in politics or business or sports, there's obviously wide-ranging content categories, but there's also very unique niches. So if you're a football fan, you like a particular team, boom, that's going to be there for you. If you want to talk about politics, very specific areas. So I think, as people get more creative with the content types and they leverage technology to create new genres, I mean, we're seeing a lot of interest in the true crime category these days, and that's one area that continues to take off. And what's interesting about that, not only is it great for podcast listening, but it's proving as an IP test ground for television, film, et cetera.
So as a publisher, what are you hearing, I guess, from both sides of the exchange, from what advertisers want? How happy are they with the current model of basically line reads from a lot of the hosts? And then on the content side, from the creators that you're helping get their content out there, what right now feel like the pain points? Because it's an industry that I think for a lot of reasons, main being the way Apple set up the app 15 years ago, it's been under-monetized for a long time. So what right now seem to be the things that are those challenges you're overcoming?
I mean, one of the things we were talking about before we got on set was the advent, Serial coming back around in 2014 was something that really put a mark in the sand in terms of new content creation. And what we're seeing is publishers creating more and compelling content. We're seeing it become more and more ubiquitous in terms of the technology from which we consume it. And as a result, a lot of advertisers are seeing the opportunities and are engaging with it from an advertiser perspective. And more importantly, it's not just the line read anymore, right? Yeah. There's really interesting ways that people are doing it and having fun with it. And advertisers are warming to that, right? They don't mind if hosts ad-lib. They don't mind if hosts have fun with it because it creates that user engagement that podcast listeners are familiar with and used to.
Help an investor understand this. Spotify is spending millions of dollars and in some regards potentially overspending to buy the podcast infrastructure. Is it a wise investment for them?
I think for Spotify, and I can't speak exactly for their business, but I will say is what we see there is a real compelling interest in bringing more listeners to the platform and extending that user consumption time. So as a result, we know that podcasts can range from anywhere for a few minutes to, in some really long cases, over an hour.
4 hours.
But really for listeners, it's really an engaging platform. We see them coming back frequently 6, 7, 8 times for people who continually listen to podcasts. And it is a great way to extend that user engagement with an app. And so for platforms like Apple Music and Spotify, who really measure themselves in terms of consumption patterns, buying into the content category that is podcasting really makes a lot of sense.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask how much more you think we're going to see targeting in terms of advertising when it comes to the podcast space, because it seems to be pretty broad in general right now.
Yeah, so I think that's the interesting thing. So something that we've worked heavily on is targeting and leveraging, basically, user data, demographic data to help identify target audiences for advertisers. So in the past, that hadn't been something that was really available in the marketplace. Our company worked with Nielsen as a use case to really develop a product that allowed us to target advertising so that if you want to reach women who are 18 to 35, you can reach that from a targeting perspective as opposed to buying a whole show. And sometimes it makes sense to buy that whole show. It might be a great audience, might be a great demographic. But if you want to get really granular, I think there's only going to be more of that and something that we're working with advertisers to really prioritize.
So from the content side, I think, NPR, for example, they do radio, right? They were going to get into the podcast game and pretty much kill it from the start because they know what works. On the audio side, from other publishers who, certainly the Daily's been very successful for the Times, but not every publisher who's video first or text first has had success. What do you think makes a successful podcast? Is it having evergreen content? Is it having high production value? Is it regularity with how you're putting it out? What seems to be working?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple common threads. I mean, certainly regularity doesn't hurt. It actually really helps. But I think most importantly, developing that relationship with the host and the audience. You mentioned Mark Maron. You talk about people. I've seen brands launch podcasts, but it's just the brand out front and center, right? Yeah. I don't relate to a brand personally as a consumer of media, nor do I think anybody here. I think once you attach yourself to an individual personality and develop an ongoing relationship with that person, that is what makes a really compelling podcast, both that and the content category you're interested in. So there's a couple of examples. I think frequency certainly helps. If people can know week by week they can come back to and have that consistent relationship, that is something that's super critical. And then, of course, the identifying the categories that your listeners want and refocusing on that.
Yeah, great insights. Megaphone CEO Brendan Monaghan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the time today.